Hello, welcome to Wellness and Wisdom Podcast with me, Dr. Nadu Tuakli. Here you can expect to hear conversations about everything women over 40 care about, from optimal wellness and peak performance, from intimacy to travel and finances and more. I will be speaking to interesting women and sometimes men in an effort to educate and motivate you to live your best life. We are in this together. If you want to find out more, please head over to my website, drtuakli.com, or subscribe to my blog. You can also read my book, Sex, Sanity, and Sleep. Talk to you soon. Hello, this is Dr. Nadu Tuakli. Once again, I have so much in store for you today, lots and lots. We are going to talk about energy, memory, supplements, and weight control. Sounds good? Well, listen up, sports fans. Today we have Dr. Emily Werner, the dietitian for the Philadelphia 76ers. How do those young basketballers run up and down the court for over an hour, day in and day out, and jump to those amazing heights? What would I like on the menu, you ask? I want what they're having. It may seem like a bit of a stretch, but what do elite athletes and mature women have in common? Here's the answer: peak performance. We all want to be at peak performance at any age, and Dr. Werner is going to tell us what to eat and how to get it. Lots of inside tips on nutrition and energy and supplements, and of course, weight control. Does that sound like a tall order? Dr. Werner is up to the challenge. She is in her third season as dietitian to the Philadelphia 76ers. She has a PhD in kinesiology, and she is also a registered dietitian with a private practice called Eat Elite Performance Nutrition. And she has specific expertise in the application of sport nutrition for health and performance. I am very pleased to present to you Dr. Emily Werner, PhD, RD. Welcome and congratulations on being in the playoffs and winning last night.
Thank you.
A little close, but the win is what counts, right?
Absolutely.
Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're happy to have you here and all the information you're going to give us. So first of all, I'd like to clarify a couple of terms for our listeners. What exactly is kinesiology? And the second question is, what is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
So, if strictly speaking, the definition of kinesiology is the study of movement, how kinesthetics work and how the body moves. It's easier explained in the US as exercise science, or exercise physiology is my expertise. And then the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist is that being a dietitian and obtaining that credential means that I have sat through all of the accredited coursework necessary, the supervised practice hours necessary, as well as the board certification exam necessary to become a dietitian. So that's my 2 years master's program, 1,500 plus hours of supervised practice, and then passing a board certification exam. Nutritionist, there is no legal holding on the word. So anybody, Joe Schmo on the street, could call themselves a nutritionist, and there's no legal ramifications if they give someone advice that it results in medical malpractice.
So basically, there's no supervision.
Correct. Yeah. So
wide supervision of nutritionists.
Exactly. There's licensure in each state, but not all states have licensure. So it's really, the easiest way to think of it is that an RD, a registered dietitian, has exemplified the coursework and the hours experience necessary to be working on medical nutrition therapy, whereas a nutritionist is more likely someone who either has no certifications whatsoever and has just read some nutrition blogs, or maybe they have other certifications. There are differences globally, but here in the US, dietitian is the gold standard for a nutrition professional.
Great. And you talked about movement. So does that mean you can tell us how to keep moving as we move into our third phase of life?
Absolutely. Yes, exercise prescription and assessment was all part of my PhD.
So in your 7 years of working with athletes, would you say generally there's a common thread?
Yeah, I think So primarily I've worked with male athletes. While I was at Michigan State, I worked with both men's and women's basketball, but more so with the men's basketball team. And then obviously the Sixers are a team of males. So I would say the common theme is that regardless of their genetics, their athletic prowess, they still just eat like guys. Like typical Western diet males, steak and potatoes. And I have some different, I've dealt with different ethnic food cultures. And really, I've worked with athletes from all around the world, but at the end of the day, they're just dudes.
So you've got to keep them in line.
A little bit.
So Emily, our first conversation was about energy at a cellular level. And I don't want to bore our listeners with a conversation about the mitochondria, which of course are the powerhouses of the cell, but not everyone knows that. And I don't want to get too scientific and bore our listeners by going too deep into the weeds of the science. However, I know they would definitely appreciate hearing about how to hold on to youthful energy and combat fatigue. What do you suggest?
I suggest focusing on diet. I think that is the best way to ensure that all of your cells are functioning optimally. Because as you said, the mitochondria are just one part of the cell, and that's just where our energy is produced. So it is important to keep them high functioning, but in general, what it's going to take to do that is a healthy diet full of macro and micronutrients that your body really needs to function.
Would you say that also is part of the basics to combat fatigue?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If I have a client, an athlete, whoever that complains of fatigue, my first questions are about their hydration and diet practices.
And when an athlete reaches their optimum weight, how do they maintain it? And how can patients do the same when they don't want to have to follow a rigid diet?
So when it comes to weight maintenance, it really boils down to a calories in, calories out perspective and what we call energy balance. So calories in is energy intake, and calories equal energy, chemically and kind of theoretically. For athletes, if they have reached their optimal playing weight, as we call it, the goal then is to match their caloric intake to exactly how much they're expending. It doesn't have to be exactly down to the precise calories. It's more about general trends. So maybe one day they're 100 calories over, another day they're 100 calories under, but that averages out to a balance after the couple of days. That's really the goal. The hard thing is monitoring and managing that. And I think that's what a lot of people in general struggle with when it comes to weight maintenance is, how do I know how many calories I'm eating and how do I know how many calories I'm expending? So that's where it gets a little tricky.
And with your athletes, is their diet different during the season, the on-season and the off-season, or do you just recommend that they eat a certain way the whole time?
It really depends on their specific goals. If I have a player we are consistently trying to manage their weight and maintain it, they are going to have to match, like I was saying, to their energy expenditure. And in the off season, that energy expenditure is going to decrease. So their caloric intake also needs to decrease. If I have a player who is trying to put on weight, I want them to be eating more than they are expending. So during the season, either if they want to lose or gain weight, I actually don't want them making those changes during the season because they're working too much to be making drastic changes in body composition. It puts them at a higher injury risk if we try to make those changes at that time. So that's where it comes in the off season. And that's where I would try to tell them, okay, you're trying to put on weight, you're trying to put on muscle. That means you need to be eating more calories than you're expending. And you're expending less outside of season because I'm hoping you're resting more, taking some time off, laying on the beach with your friends, like I don't care. But that's the time to really be packing in the calories and pairing that with appropriate training to build muscle. And same thing on the other side, if they are trying to lose weight, still trying to reduce that caloric intake below the amount of caloric expenditure.
Now, I always thought that building muscle was about taking in protein, which is what most people think. But you're talking about taking in more carbs in order to make more muscle.
I'm talking about taking in more calories in general. So you need to be in caloric excess, and research has shown this, that you need to be in caloric excess in order to put on muscle. So if a big proportion of that calorie intake does need to be protein. So it is important, if you're trying to put on muscle, to focus on protein in the diet, but that doesn't mean to negate carbs at all. You definitely still need both.
So speaking of diets, what suggestions do you have for regular people who really want to lose weight?
So I actually don't love the word diet. I think it has a very short-term connotation to it. And I say that because most people, when they think, I want to go on a diet, I want to lose weight, they choose some sort of eating pattern or strategy that they end up not liking after a certain amount of time, or it kind of fails for them, and then it ends up resulting in them rebounding back the weight because they stopped following that eating pattern and they never really found a strategy that works best for them, their lifestyle, and in a sustainable way. So plenty of research has shown that the best diet for weight loss and weight maintenance is the one that people can stick with. It's about consistency. It's not necessarily the specific diet. So when I'm working with someone whose goal it is to lose weight, my approach is primarily built around their lifestyle, their habits, and their preferences. I definitely want to promote lean protein, lots of fruits and vegetables. Like those, I tell people, are their best friends. But as far as how much to eat in a day, when to eat it, what to eat, all of that, it really is based on the individual person and finding a strategy that they can consistently do day in and day out and that they don't hate. So I like I said, I don't like the word diet. I think of things as a lifestyle.
So is the Mediterranean diet all it's cracked up to be?
The Mediterranean diet.
And what?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, what exactly, for people that don't know, what exactly is the Mediterranean diet?
Sure. So the Mediterranean diet is great. I would actually call that the Mediterranean lifestyle because it's really, they call it a diet, but I think, again, that comes with that short-term connotation. So the Mediterranean diet or lifestyle is this style of eating that emphasizes seafood, lean proteins, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and healthy fats. So that's like our olive oils and our avocados. That style of eating it's a heart healthy style of eating. It's something that it got its name because that's the primary form of dietary behaviors seen in the Mediterranean region. So that's kind of where that comes from. It's definitely all it's cracked up to be. It's a very healthful, heart healthy way of eating. And for someone who is just getting started in a weight loss or a health focused journey, that's definitely a place that I recommend they look into because there's a lot of good resources out there that kind of explain like what types of foods to be eating, the other kinds of foods to eat only in moderation or avoid.
So when I'm in the Mediterranean, I happen to notice that they eat a lot of cheese. And I thought cheese was not good for you. How does that fit in?
Well, why do you think cheese isn't good for you?
Just because of the cholesterol and maybe putting on weight. I think a lot of cheese here in this country is in the lasagna and the pizza and, a lot of other things that are probably weighing the cheese down. But, for patients who have high cholesterol, I'm constantly saying, well, you can't eat your cheese. But then you go to the Mediterranean and they have like all kinds of cheeses.
Mm-hmm. It really is kind of like you said, here a lot of times the cheese is eaten in combination with a lot of other things. So cheese in and of itself is not necessarily bad. I will say there's something to the highly processed versions that we are accustomed to in a Western diet. I don't personally love those. I promote trying to eat foods that are as close to how they came out of the earth as possible. So the least amount of processing steps. Like I once saw a video of a slice of American cheese being set on fire and it wouldn't melt. and I'm like, I'm not putting that in my body. And then you compare that to food processes over in Europe, and it's typically a lot less processing that goes on. So the cheese there included. But like I said, cheese in and of itself is not bad. Yes, it contains cholesterol. Yes, it contains carbohydrates and fat, but it also contains protein and it contains calcium and has a lot of really good nutrients. So I think if cheese is worked into a diet in moderation with everything else, it's absolutely a healthy option.
I notice in the Mediterranean, they don't put expiration dates on their food because everything is so fresh and it's eaten either today or tomorrow. They don't bother with the, expires in 6 months kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right about it coming from the earth and being totally fresh and unprocessed. It's really good. Do you recommend intermittent fasting? And if so, for how long?
That goes back to my comment about tailoring an approach to the individual. I have recommended it in the past for people who either have already started trying it and they liked it or it seemed to work for them. It's typically not my first go-to when it comes to strategies for weight loss or anything like that. But for some people, it's a lot easier to tell people what they can't do than teach them how to manage what they can do, if that makes sense. So some people function better if I'm like, if the strategy that you want, you can't eat before noon and you can't eat after 8 p.m., like fine, give that a try. It takes the body time to adjust to something like that. So if you are accustomed to having breakfast at 8 a.m., lunch at noon, and dinner at 6 or 7 p.m., if you change that habit, your body is going to kind of be like, what's going on? Why are we starving ourselves? I'm hungry. I want food. And then your cravings kind of go all out of whack. And it's really at all times, the body is trying to preserve itself and what state it's currently in.
Right.
So, an intermittent fast.
So that might encourage you to store.
Exactly. And that's why some people experience issues with losing weight if they're actually not eating enough food. It's the body kind of goes into this like preservation type state. Again, it comes into calories in, calories out, but there's a lot of nuance in the hormone activity that's going on in the body to preserve itself and the hunger cues and all that kind of stuff. So with intermittent fasting, if you can get used to or kind of push through those feelings of hunger, it could be a beneficial strategy for someone. And there are definitely lots of studies that have shown benefits not only for weight maintenance, but also for mitochondrial health, which again, powerhouse of the cell, giving us our energy and all of that. So yeah, I'm not entirely against it, but it's really circumstantial and needs to be tailored to the individual.
And if someone does do intermittent fasting, do they do it for 6 months? Do they do it lifelong? Do they do it for a couple weeks?
Definitely more than a couple of weeks. I would say what's that saying about how long it takes to form a habit? Like 8 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah. So
for the body to create a new habit.
Exactly. So I would say it's the same thing when it comes to trying to make any sort of dietary changes. In order to truly experience the benefits or the possible benefits of something, you need to be doing it for at least 6 to 8 weeks. But again, if I'm recommending intermittent fasting to somebody and they do it for 8 weeks and then they stop doing it, what was the point of doing it in the first place? So
they haven't really benefited.
Right. I'm going to try to help them find a strategy that they can do lifelong.
One of my patients told me, she said, well, doctor, I heard that being overweight is all about your blood type. What's that all about?
I actually have no idea.
How does that work?
I've never heard that. There is, I wonder if that's playing into there's a background of research about specific genotypes of overweight and obesity. For your listeners who may not know, genotype just refers to your DNA. So is it in your DNA to be overweight or obese? There's absolutely something to that. Overweight and obese parents are more likely to bear overweight and obese children. It's not a perfect causation relationship. I have overweight and obese parents, and I guess by BMI standards, I'm overweight, but I'm a very healthy, weight. I know plenty of people who have kind of gone one way or the other. So again, it's not a perfect causational relationship, but there's a correlation there for sure. But it's not blood type.
Yeah, I think what happened was someone wrote a book about eat for your blood type. And since then, it's become almost like a fad. What's my blood type? I need to eat for my blood type. And as I understand it, the blood types, after all, how many do we have? All of 3. So, 3 different blood types are going to determine how many people are overweight. But when I read about this many, many years ago, the theory was that people with a certain blood type come from a certain area of the world. And in that particular area of the world, they eat a certain way. And so if you figure out that you originally came from Persia or the Mediterranean, you should eat a certain way. I think sometimes people like to get into fads and the idea that, my millionth grandfather 4 times removed came from Italy, therefore I can eat pasta. I don't see that. That was the theory. And I promised my patient that I would ask you that question. So lastly, on the topic of weight, are there any natural appetite suppressants that work?
That's a tough question. So I have 2 thoughts. My first thought is that a hunger cue can often be, actually, let me rephrase that. A thirst cue can actually be mistaken as a hunger cue. So one thing that I recommend to people if they start to feel hungry, especially if it's like within 2-3 hours of just having had a meal, I will recommend to them, drink some water. Try drinking some water, see if that's really what your body was craving and it was just trying to send you some sort of message. So it's sending you a message of a hunger cue when you're actually just thirsty. The second idea that I have, and I hope I don't get crucified online for this, it's mostly anecdotal kind of data from colleagues and also myself, is that glutamine and potentially even like a greens powder can suppress hunger cues. Not for long. It might stave off your hunger for 20-30 minutes. Because if you're truly hungry, those cues are coming from not only your brain, but your stomach talking to your brain. And it's about how it's about how full your stomach is. It's about whether your brain needs nutrients. Like there's a lot of different things in the body that can trigger a hunger cue. So finding something that's just going to suppress that appetite in a natural way, not using any sort of drug like the semaglutide conversation that's happening, to do this in a natural way, it's not going to last for very long. Some people have experienced suppressed appetite for a brief period of time with a glutamine supplement, and glutamine is an amino acid that is essentially fuel for the colon. That's the primary amino acid that the bacteria in the colon feed off of. So that can kind of just distract the hunger cues that are originating in the colon for a very short period of time. But again, not for very long.
So you mentioned the semaglutide, and let me just tell folks what that is, because Dr. Emily here is being diplomatic and not mentioning what everybody's talking about. Ozempic! Right?
Uh-huh.
Ozempic, Mounjaro,
the only commercial on TV nowadays.
Oh, my goodness. And diabetics can't get the stuff because everybody's trying to. But even that is short term, right? I mean, if you stop taking it,
it's
that hunger cue comes back.
And people don't know how to manage it on their own. So really, hunger cues, there's a mental aspect of it as well. And
right,
again, the body just is gonna tell you what it wants, but not always. It'll tell you what it needs to, but sometimes the body doesn't really know which is which. So it's going to send you cues and send your brain cues to do certain things. And those cues can either be based physiologically, like you actually need something, or they're based emotionally. There's this gut-brain axis we talk about where the gut speaks to the brain, tells the brain to tell the body it wants something. And that could be based in anxiety or any other type of emotion, and not necessarily like your body is missing a nutrient type thing.
What about chromium? Do you think that chromium helps sugar cravings? I give my patients chromium sometimes, especially if they're diabetic, to help their bodies handle blood sugar a little bit more efficiently. But I do find that a lot of people say it helps the sugar cravings.
I'm less familiar with it. I've heard of it briefly. It's not been an area of my practice that I've really needed to dive into. So I would say I just don't have a ton of expertise on it.
Yeah, your guys probably don't get the sugar cravings.
Well, they have appetites, let me tell you. But for the most part, I need them to be eating.
So let's briefly turn to the 3 deadly diseases of estrogen deficiency: heart disease, osteoporosis, and dementia. So we talked about the Mediterranean diet for heart health. Obviously, if people have a very high cholesterol, that's something that they can work on to reduce their risk of heart disease. What can people with high cholesterol absolutely not eat?
That is a tough question.
Besides bacon.
Yeah, I would say really the foods that are high in saturated fats. And that's going to be your bacon, your high fatty meats, processed meats with all the nitrates, high fat pastries. It's something that if you have high cholesterol and you really are at risk of this chronic heart failure, MI, atherosclerosis, like really all of those kind of scary things, doing the best you can to avoid those things entirely is the absolute goal, at least for a few years, to get your biomarkers under control, and then hopefully being able to find a strategy where you can treat yourself to bacon in the long run, but that it's totally individual, and you know way better than I do if that's going to be even in the cards for somebody.
And do you feel that perhaps they should switch from their regular cooking oil to olive oil, for example?
I think
like permanently.
Yeah. Personally, I am of the mindset that there isn't enough solid research behind the differences in the oils, that unless somebody can afford to switch to an olive oil more often, but for olive oil to me is not for cooking. Like, it has a very distinct taste. Olive oil is for dressing. I recommend for cooking a canola oil because that's still got a higher unsaturated to saturated fat ratio, and the unsaturated is the healthy fat, and it's cheap, it's inexpensive. Again, some people might completely disagree with me because it is another processed oil, but what oil isn't processed? So again, I don't think that there's enough research to really hold up on this distinction, this really strict view of olive oil versus everything else. But I would say canola is a better option than vegetable. Olive oil for dressing is the best option. At the end of the day, oil's oil. So if we're talking about weight and we're talking about calories in, calories out, cholesterol, you still need to use those things sparingly.
Now, for people who choose not to take HRT, are there particular supplements that would be good to prevent or improve osteoporosis?
Vitamin D and calcium are the first 2 that come to mind. Definitely those. And again, just an overall well-balanced, healthful diet with good amount of protein. Definitely protein. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm a huge proponent of hormone replacement therapy for prevention of dementia in women. Not something that you necessarily have to worry about with your clientele, but obviously that's not the only solution. So for people who have memory challenges and want to stay sharp, is there a particular supplement that you recommend or a supplement regimen for memory?
I would say the first step is addressing it through the diet, and that's the same across all of my practice, no matter the clientele. You can't out-supplement a bad diet, is kind of my quote. So, start there. Are you consuming lots of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and see how you can manage your diet to try to make it more optimal for just long-term health? Because again, a big part of aging, dementia, is cellular dysfunction and mitochondrial dysfunction. So as we age and the stresses that we accrue in the cells start to, really destruct our cells, that's where the memory loss comes in and all of these chronic health issues. So if we can do what we can through the diet to optimize the cells, that's going to be great. On top of that, from a supplement standpoint, really the things that are going to help mitochondrial health. And to me, that right now there's solid research around urolithin A, and there's solid research around CoQ10.
CoQ10. I thought that was coming.
Mm-hmm.
So CoQ10 is a great antioxidant. And while we're on the subject of supplements, do you recommend everyone take a multivitamin or just work on their diet and forget the pill?
Again, I lean diet first. If someone loves fruits and vegetables and has access to them, I'm going to choose that first. The thing with any supplement is that it's absorption and bioavailability. So how much of it we can actually get into our bloodstream through the gut is dependent on the gut, which most people in the Western Hemisphere do not have a good gut microbiome that's optimal for the absorption of nutrients. But that's where a multivitamin supplement could come in handy because it's a more calibrated dose of that specific of that group of nutrients. But again, it's going to be absorbed better if it's taken with food stuff. So that's kind of how our body was meant to process nutrients, is through food. So adding a multivitamin shouldn't hurt, but I don't think there's enough solid research to say that it's 100% necessary for everybody.
Now, you mentioned the microbiome.
I did.
And we know how important that is. The gut, for the people listening that don't know what the microbiome is, perhaps you'd like to tell them.
Yes. So the gut,
I know it's a whole topic on its own.
So depending on how you think of it, the gut is anything from the mouth to the anus. And it is, so for your listeners, imagine a very, very, very long tube with the opening at the mouth and an opening at the anus. So it's technically a system that is external to the body. And you could pass something through it entirely that never actually enters the body. Think about if you eat corn and you excrete corn. And that's just because we can't digest the cellulose in it. But talking about digestion, so digestion occurs in the gut. There's many different stages of it that begins in the mouth. But what we're talking about with the microbiome is this general term to encompass all of the cells and the bacteria that line the gut. So it's really the interface, it's the barrier, it's the wall between the external world and your internal body. It is made up of bacteria. Most are good, some are bad, but all are necessary. And the ratio of different bacteria that you have is going to determine how you absorb nutrients. And the way to affect what bacteria you have is, number 1, genetics, number 2, diet. So what you eat is going to feed those bacteria, promote those bacteria, or hurt those bacteria. And then that's going to have an effect on what you can absorb into the body and then what takes action within the body.
And if you take too many antibiotics, you can kill the good bacteria.
Yes.
And that will change your microbiome as well.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of talk recently about the microbiome because all the immune system is actually in the bowel, even though people don't realize that that's the main immunological organ. So when you have autoimmune diseases and rheumatoid arthritis and all these other things, the bowel has a role to play there. And the microbiome is critical for maintaining it. And the microbiome has been changing over these years with all the pollution and the plastics and all the other stuff. So, should everyone take a probiotic to make sure that they keep their bowel healthy?
I recently read a paper on probiotic versus diet full of fermented foods and fiber. And the diet with fermented food and fiber won. So should everyone take a probiotic? I don't think so. I think the way to start is first is promoting gut health through the diet. So that's fermented foods, which are options like kombucha, kefir, yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, and then also high fiber foods. So that's going to be fruits and vegetables, and I keep saying it, fruits and vegetables, ideally with the skin on if you can, depending on the fruit or vegetable. Whole grains are a good source of fiber. The addition of nuts and seeds to your diet, just really optimizing fiber intake, it has been shown to be the best thing for the gut.
And fiber is super important, and that's great. As far as the fermented foods are concerned, you said earlier that folks have to get a diet that they can live with. I gotta tell you, most of that fermented stuff does not taste good.
Hey,
if you don't like the smell of it, or sometimes it just seems so foreign to our normal diet that, I see folks like, I'm going to drink kombucha and I've got this and wonderful looking shakes. They're not going to stick with that,
I love
But
kombucha.
I agree. It's good for their microbiome. It's good for their microbiome.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you recommend shakes for people?
I think it depends.
In terms of being able to control how many calories they take, because sometimes I wonder if the purpose of the shake is just to kind of like fill you up, and it's not really, because shakes are totally different. Someone could be having cucumber with whatever, and they say, no, I take shakes in the morning, and as if that automatically makes it a good thing.
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual. It's not my first go-to when people ask for help if they need more protein in their diet. They're like, can I just have a protein shake? And I'm like, well, I mean, you can, or you can just eat more protein, like regular protein. And in the same way, if somebody wants to make a smoothie because in the morning for their breakfast, because they're on the go, they need something quick and portable, great. Smoothie is an amazing option. And I'm definitely going to recommend they lean towards using whole food options like protein and milk for the Greek yogurt and milk for the protein, lots of fruits and vegetables, even maybe a little bit of oats in there for a good carbohydrate and fiber source, as opposed to these, again, highly processed, grab and go type options that might be lower in calorie for sure. But to me, I'm like, at what cost? Not only financially, but
and they come out of a can usually.
Exactly.
They come out of a can. A can of powder should be a little suspicious.
Yeah.
Because you don't know, how processed is that?
Yep. And again, it's a supplement, and so you need a third-party tested option, and it gets really complicated when you stray away from just whole food.
Basic food. So my last question for you is, when people do take supplements, as obviously they are likely to, and they buy them from the internet, or how does someone know that they're actually getting a good supplement, a pure supplement, or what is even on the label? Because I read an article once about during COVID, and they tested some zinc products at Walmart, and there was literally no zinc in the product. And we know that nutritional supplements are not RDA approved or monitored, so how does one know how to get something that's pure?
Yes. So yes, as you just said, the supplement industry is not FDA regulated like our whole food is. So the best way to make sure that you are getting what you're paying for when it comes to supplements is to choose third-party tested options. The gold standard third-party testing companies for that are, if you're looking at vitamins and minerals, that's going to be USP. They all have very specific labels, and I can send those to you for visuals. USP. Then for other supplements like your proteins, your collagens, all that kind of stuff, that you should look for NSF, which is the National Science Foundation. That's I believe that's their acronym, but it's NSF, and there is a certified for sport line. So anyone who maybe has kids that are thinking about playing in the NCAA or hopefully going on a professional definitely their sport line because they check for NCAA banned substances. And then another one is Informed Choice or Informed Sport. Same company, just one checks for banned substances and the other just checks for truth in labeling and safety.
So that was Informed Source.
Informed Choice or Informed Sport.
Okay, so it's been great chatting with you, Emily. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with me. And I wish the 76ers all the best of luck. They looked like they were struggling a little bit last night, but they've got a couple of days to recoup, I guess. Mm-hmm. So would you like to give us some take-home messages?
I think my take-home messages are that fruits and vegetables are your best friend. If you are seeking health and wellness, find a strategy, a diet, a lifestyle that works for you. And when in doubt, make sure you are seeking information from reputable sources. Never be hesitant to ask an expert.
And my take-home message here is I agree with you 100%. You cannot substitute fresh fruit and vegetables. And lifestyle changes are critical regardless of who you are, whether you're an elite athlete or a young person just starting out or a woman moving into retirement. Lifestyle changes always comes up. Everything in medicine, of course, is about lifestyle. And as you pointed out, that's the last thing anyone wants to hear. The first thing is, give me the pill, make it easy, right? Don't ask me to change what I do, change what I eat, change how I do it. But when you're seeking change, sometimes you've got to participate in that change. So thank you so much, Emily. And I hope you don't mind me calling you Emily.
Of course.
This is Dr. Emily Werner, and she is the team dietitian for the 76ers, the Philadelphia 76ers. And she was nice enough to talk to us this evening. And wish you best of luck.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks for listening to Wellness and Wisdom with me, Dr. Nadu Tuakli. If you want to find out more information, head over to drtuakli.com or subscribe to my blog. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please click the follow button on your favorite podcast platform and share this episode with a friend. Wishing you the best of health and happiness. We're in this together. Until next time, stay well.